Buddy, I believe that we are live. Let's see if I could see it on Facebook. Okay, it's official. We are live. Awesome. Hey, everybody. I'm here with Katharine, coming to you live. If you are with us, share a comment. Let us know that you're seeing us okay. I'll just give a couple minutes before we start. All right. Anyone there? Hey, I'm going to write a comment. Bonjour, bonjour, Katharine. Hi, Amin. Awesome. So it's working. You could see us live. Amazing. I always get nervous. So we'll just jump in. We're going to do some introductions. So it'll be a couple of minutes. So if anyone's joining us late, no problem. I'll quickly introduce myself. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Bridget Clary. I work for Duolingo for Schools on the community engagement team. So I'm working here on our Facebook page, of course, to deliver professional development at events such as this one. And I am a past language teacher. I spent 5 years teaching French in upstate New York before I made the decision to move to France. So that's where I am now. So I will hand it off to Katharine to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I am Katharine Wozniak. I have been teaching Spanish, high school Spanish, for the last 6 years. This is my 7th year. And for context, I now teach technically Spanish 2 for juniors at a private Catholic school in Ohio, US.
Awesome. Thanks, Katharine. So a lot of people joining us now. Amazing. So we are going to have a plushie giveaway, as I promised. So here he is. So the first question we want to ask before we get started. And so I'm going to drop the question in the chat as well. And you're going to have time to really think about this and answer, because we're going to be choosing the winner after the event. So no rush, but we're curious as to how do you use Duolingo in the classroom? So Katharine's going to be talking about how she uses Duolingo in the classroom. So we're curious as to how you use Duolingo in the classroom and whether or not you know about blended learning, or you yourself have ever used blended learning or been curious about it. So like I said, I'm going to write that in the chat so that you can have it. So this is for the first plushie giveaway, and we're going to be choosing the winner for the plushie giveaway at the end of the event. So you have time, so no rush. So Katharine, I will hand it off to you.
Thank you. All right, so Bridget did ask about blended learning, and that is because that is what I utilize in my classroom, and I'm trying it out for the first year this year. So I'm going to share with you all what I shared on the first day of school with my students, because they had really never experienced blended learning. And so this will be kind of like for them what you will see, what it was like on that first day. So I had 2 main goals when I started blended learning. And my first goal was for students to learn exactly what they need to learn. And then my second goal was to have students have ownership of their own learning by not having to rely on what others are learning in the classroom. I also call my class a Spanish language lab, because it's more of a language lab that you would see in college than it is a traditional classroom. So let me provide more context. This is what my classroom kind of looks like from like an aerial view. So as you can see, there are desks lined up against, what there would be the walls or the windows. So students kind of have their own kind of private space and zoned in space so that they can just focus on their learning. They usually have their headphones on, and it doesn't allow for a lot of disruption. So that's really nice. And then I have this 2-person table in the middle of the room. I call it a conference table. I also call it table talks, and I'll talk about what happens there as well. So this is what my classroom looks like so I can best facilitate blended learning using Duolingo as my main curriculum. On this first day, I also show this video. It's from a modern classroom project. This is just an general overview of what blended learning is all about. And it's a very short 3-minute video. I'm obviously not going to play it now, but it gives students a good idea of what to expect that year. And so what they learn is that I have created videos, like what I would do normally is live instruction. So instead of doing it live, I've created those live instruction videos for them to watch, and they can all do that on their own time and be in different places at the same time. So what we did was on the second day of school, after I showed them everything they needed to know about what it would look like, they took what I call a diagnostic test to determine where each student would start their language journey on what we now know is the path on Duolingo. And I call it a diagnostic test, but all it really was students would try and test out of the units. So wherever it said jump here on the path, I would just have them start with unit 1. And if they made it through unit 1, I would try to have them test out of unit 2 and so forth and so on until they couldn't test out. So if they try to test out of unit 5, but they didn't, they would just begin at unit 4. And this way, this would kind of localize exactly where every student needs to be. So yes, you're probably catching on that there is a chance that a lot of students could be in a lot of different units. And that was kind of my point. So I'll add more context. One of the other reasons why I wanted to do this, try blended learning and use Duolingo as my main curriculum, is my students come from all different middle schools and elementary schools, and some of them have had some Spanish experience and some of them have not had any. And it's very unfair when students get to my class in the 10th or 11th grade and they are all over the place and I'm teaching them the same thing, which I have been for the last 6 years. And in my opinion, it just wasn't working because I felt there were some students who were very bored because it was too easy. Some of them felt like there were huge learning gaps, so I couldn't fill those in. So this kind of allowed me to fill in all the holes that were previously kept open. Okay, so I tell my students that what we're doing is we're going to have these learning cycles, and I'm going to go through these learning cycles right now. So a learning cycle only basically means like a span of time. So it can be anywhere from 4 to 5 days. And it begins with a new unit, and that unit is different for every student. So some students might be on unit 5, another student might be on unit 1, whatever that is. And you begin that unit by first watching a direct instructional video that I personally made, and they're completing these video guided notes along the way that I've also created. So I create like this packet for every unit. And in this packet, one of the first things they see are the learning objectives that are all from Duolingo, by the way, and then these video guided notes. So as they're watching the video that I made on the topic of that unit, they are taking notes. And all I did with the videos, for the instructional videos, all I did was I looked at the guidebooks provided by Duolingo, or what we used to call them tips. And I use that information to basically instruct on what they will see in that unit. So when they are done with the video guided notes, I sign off on those notes. So you can see where it's highlighted. I actually physically sign off on it, and that gives them kind of an element of, okay, I need to get this done. This is important. And it's always completed on the first day of the learning cycle. And they earn points for doing this. So this is all very important because they're going to be using these notes as they progress in the unit and in the lessons. So after they have watched the video, taken notes on the video, they also in the packet see some of these key phrases, which also come from the guidebook. So I'm using Duolingo to its full capacity, right? Everything that Duolingo is offering, I am taking and I'm using. And they start their lessons along the path. So while they're doing these lessons, they have two tasks or two written tasks that they have to complete as they're doing the lessons on their computers. One, I have them write new words. So these words are, of course, usually coded in orange, but even if they're not, and the student just feels disoriented about the word, I have them write it down in the target language, which is Spanish, and then in their native language, English. So they kind of have this running, let me show you really quickly, running log of all these new words or phrases that they're learning in that unit. And this is all in the same packet. So I tell them that we're doing this so that they can take new information, take it from the short-term to long-term memory. And the second task that they have to do, the second written task, while they are completing the unit on Duolingo, they are to write 3 mistakes and their corrections. So anytime they make that mistake, and you can adjust this, you can have them write 5 mistakes or 10 mistakes. I just have 3 mistakes for right now. So when they make that mistake, they write it and then they write the correction. And so it allows for some reflection as they're working through the unit. So they're not just going on to the next question because they get it wrong and they're frustrated. They're actually forced to look at what they're getting wrong and why. So as you all know, the stories are now in the path, and that is also really great. So what I have them do while they're reading the stories is still same packet right after they write their mistakes and write the all those new words down. I have the exact same questions or prompts that appear in the stories. I have them in the packet, as you can see, like I'm showing the one buenos dias on the screen. And they have to write their answers just like they're answering on the computer, same exact way. And they even have to do the 5 pairs at the end of the story. So they're writing the whole time. And that's, I think, a very important distinction between them just working on the lesson on their computer and them being actively engaged on 2 things that both help one another. So when they are done with a unit, they have to physically show me their path being gold, just like this. And I don't actually assign any assignments on Duolingo because I just physically approach their computer and I see that they have completed the unit. And at the very, very end, they have to respond to 2 reflection questions. And these reflection questions kind of change every once in a while. But the idea is, again, they're reflecting on the unit. And then I sign off on this unit to indicate that they completed the path on Duolingo, and also they've completed the whole packet from start to finish. And then they earn points. So that's the biggest chunk of their grade because it's the most work. And when they are done with their unit on Duolingo and in the packet, I have to give them a mastery check or an assessment or a quiz, whatever you might want to call it. And so I've created on Google Forms, I've created mastery checks for all the units. And basically, as students finish that unit, I send them this mastery check. And this is where I enter their like mastery grade. So that's how I know whether they really understand the material or not. And then they, of course, earn points. So that all happens in the span of a learning cycle that can be anywhere from 4 to 5 days. And then the same is just repeated in the next unit, whatever that unit is for them. So then another learning cycle begins. And basically the way I have it in like the grade book, if you're interested, is I'll have learning cycle 1 is due on this day, then learning cycle 2. So I've numbered the learning cycles, but that doesn't mean that that's a specific unit. That's just whatever unit that student is working on. So this is a sample of what a learning cycle might look like. The first day always begins with the video guided notes. They have to be signed by me. And then the majority of the time, as you can see, is spent on the actual practice, on the lessons, on writing the new words, writing the mistakes, reading the stories, writing the answers to those stories. And at the very tail end, they have their mastery check. So ideally, students use up all that time wisely, right? And manage their time wisely, because this is kind of self-paced in a way. And they start on time and finish on time. So this is what this looks like for now.
This is
Yeah.
awesome, Catherine. Sorry to interrupt, but I actually have a question. Well, I have a question, and there's actually a question in the chat as well. Some people, so from the chat, some people are wondering, what is the lowest level that you would recommend for using this as a tool? So is there a grade that you would recommend starting something like this? What are some of your thoughts there?
Okay, so I do teach high school, and I've only ever taught high school Spanish, but I think this could be totally doable with middle school. I don't know about elementary. I can't speak to that, but I think middle school would be very doable, like as early as 5th grade. And then of course, like, you know, your video guided notes can be more tailored to students who are much younger. So there are ways to change this up. But I think a key component is students are not only learning, you know, the target language in this, they're also learning how to manage their time. And that's a whole other like skill set that you learn like later on, you know, maybe not yet in elementary school, but I mean, why not? It could happen. It just depends on, you know, the strategies implemented.
Absolutely, definitely could just simply be, you know, take this idea for your elementary school students and just simply, you know, switch it up where needed.
Yeah,
I,
actually, I'll add one more thing. You
yep,
could also just like what I have is this happens every single day all year round. But if you're working with smaller grade or younger grade levels, maybe you could do this like once a week, try it out, right? And it could be like, oh, this is blended learning day, something like that. So it could work with a lot more boundaries, I guess.
for sure. So, please feel free to ask questions in the chat as well as they come up, everyone. This is awesome. But I actually have a question that I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you. So looking at this, Catherine, you know, this is so great because we know that, you know, having such a set routine in the classroom really helps with classroom management, right?
Yeah.
However, you may have students that are maybe off task or bored at times. So what do you do with those students who run into those kind of setbacks?
Yes, and that does happen. And by the way, there are students who don't complete the learning cycle on time. That happens. The majority do, but you know that like any other you know, learning strategy, there it's imperfect in its own way. So there are a couple of things that I do when I am sensing that students are a bit antsy because they've been doing the same thing over and over again. So one is whatever holiday is coming up next. So of course, Day of the Dead is coming up in November. And so I've been slowly preparing my students for this big project they're going to be working on. And in order to prepare them for this project, I need to teach them about Day of the Dead. So what I've been doing is every couple of days, so this will also be in its own like separate cycle, but it's way more unofficial. I will have some kind of video on a specific topic related to Day of the Dead. So for instance, this week we had a video on ofrendas, on the altars. And so it's like a short video, and I've made my own worksheet that goes with it with some comprehension questions about what is happening, why and where and all of that. And what I do is I give that to students when I can tell they need like a little break from Duolingo, or if they finish a learning cycle or they finish a unit early, I give that to them to work on. So there's always something that they could be working on that's just a little different, but they still have enough time to finish the unit they're on. And in addition, so that's like the cultural side. So like this is a fun way to bring in culture into the classroom in this kind of setting, in a blended learning setting. And then you may recall from the first one of the first slides, I had a little table in the middle of the room. And what happens at this table is while this learning cycle is happening, and while some students are like, oh, I'm getting a little tired of doing the same lesson, I call students up for some short conversation in Spanish, and I call that table talks. And what I've done is I've created slides that are aligned to the Duolingo units. And I haven't created them all, but I have like at least 12 or 13 different slides for every unit. And the idea is that I create like short phrases or short questions or prompts, and I have them respond to me. And this is a great way to, first of all, check that your students are actually pronouncing things correctly, because I know that one of the frustrations sometimes about Duolingo is that students can skip the speaking portion. So if they're prompted to speak, they can just opt out of that. Well, this doesn't let them opt out of anything. They have to speak to me. So this is a great way for me to really make sure that they're learning everything, right? They're speaking, writing, listening, all of that. I think I mentioned them all, right? Reading, writing, speaking, listening. Yes, but mostly speaking in this specific case. So I'll call students up, and this can take like 3 to 4 minutes. And it's also just something different, right? So I'm introducing some kind of variety into the learning cycle. So they'll have the little culture piece, and then they'll have a little conversation with me. So that's what happens. And that's what I do to kind of break up that that cycle so that it's not too stale, because it can get at some points a little bit stale. So I actually want to go on and say that I also implement bonus points. So I know that a lot of teachers will use Duolingo purely for bonus or extra credit, but I've like went even further, and like if a student has a 30-day streak, I will give them bonus points. If they reach the legendary level, they get bonus points. If they hold on to all of their units, their packets in their binder, they get bonus points. So I provide a lot of like extra things that they can do that will also encourage them to just stay on task for bonus points. And then, like I said before, I use some culture interspersed in the learning cycles to keep things fresh. And of course, to do the one thing that like currently I can't do on Duolingo, which is teach them about culture. So this is probably my favorite slide, and Bridget and I both worked on this. So I have a total of 95 students. And these students, this is a snapshot in time. So I collected this data about a week ago. These are the 16 different units that my students are all on. And we're talking from unit 3 all the way to unit 30. So you can see that there's a large portion of students like in unit 5, 6, and 7. But the fact that there are 16 different units that are represented here means that my students all know very different things, and they're all in very different places when it comes to their Spanish like skill set, right? The target language skill set. And this shows me, it's evidence enough for me to say, I'm glad that I'm doing this in this way, blended learning using Duolingo, because I'm able to reach every one of my students exactly where they're at, which I've never been able to do in this way. So I love this slide because it just shows that in clear, like it's data that you can easily see and understand. And I think that that's very powerful, because this is something that I can show to an administrator, you know, parents, other students who are like, why are we doing this way? This is exactly why we're doing it, because you all know very different things. So I do that. And then I wanted to add one more thing that, of course, we have to have our students know what the objective is every day. And because every student is in a different place, the objective that I have everyone read every day during the agenda when we are all together, so to speak, I have them say, I am reading, listening, writing, and speaking Spanish at a developmentally appropriate level for me. And I feel that that applies every single day to everything that they do.
This is amazing, Catherine. This is awesome. Is it a good time for me to ask you another question? Sorry to, I
Yes,
didn't mean
that's
to
okay.
interrupt you, but
I'm just
so
gonna
I
stop
was
the share.
curious. Yeah, absolutely. So of course this is so different from a normal class structure, right? So my question is, what would you say to anyone who might feel that this kind of structure and using Duolingo as a main curriculum isn't going to be effective? For example, like how do you convince, administration or parents even who might think of Duolingo simply as a game?
Mhm. Um, so I think, first of all, it's all about perspective, and how Duolingo is framed to administration, students, and parents. So if administration, parents, students have only really experienced Duolingo in that way, right? Like only as a game because it's only been um, utilized for bonus points or homework, then it makes sense that Duolingo would be kind of typecast in that way. I totally understand, right? If it's only being used for that and people have only been experiencing it that way, then they only see it in that light. And our administrators and parents, they're not going in deep into Duolingo and really trying to understand what kind of content is really being presented. They're not on the teacher dashboards like we are, right? They're not seeing all the objectives and the benchmarks and the ACTFL standards or the CEFR standards that we know are very important and we're really thrilled to see because they are like the whole reason you were even using Duolingo in the first place. So it's all about framing that. So I think it's almost like our job, if we want to use Duolingo in a more all-encompassing, holistic way, we have to show the people who are intrigued by that, right? We have to show them this is everything it can do. It's not just a game. There's so much more, right? When you take away the colorful animation, there's real content there that's made by learning scientists and they know what they're doing. And so Duolingo's curriculum is a powerhouse and we have to start treating it as such. Another thing is simply like everything that I just presented now, like all those scaffolds that I've had, the video guided notes and everything that's within those notes and everything I have students do in addition to just doing the lessons on Duolingo, that in itself shows that Duolingo has a lot to offer because you can do so much with it, right? If it was something where it's just a game, I wouldn't be able to create all these wonderful additions to it and make it aligned so perfectly to what they're doing on there, because it would be kind of like unworkable. Like, oh, it only exists as a game, so I can only work with it as a game. But it's so much more than that because I've been able to experience it as so much more than that. So in my opinion, it's really about perspective, showing people who are, curious or doubtful that, look, this is everything it can do. Look at all these standards. I mean, essentially, it's like a textbook, but even better because a textbook isn't updated as often as Duolingo is. So I think that speaks volumes too.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I certainly agree. I wish I had known to the extent that Duolingo could be used in the classroom when I was in the classroom. I definitely would have used it, especially for the times I had to teach Spanish. I'm not a Spanish teacher. But I have another question actually that kind of piggybacks off of what you were just saying. So of course you put in a lot of work to create your classroom as a blended learning classroom using Duolingo. You created all your guided notes, created all your instructional videos. But what would you say would be an easy way that someone can incorporate something similar in their own curriculum tomorrow, for example? So what if someone doesn't have time, but wants to maybe do this on a smaller scale? What would you say to them?
So you could just take like pieces of what I have in the notes. Like for instance, the next time you assign a specific assignment to a student on Duolingo, also instruct them to write 10 new words and their translation in a notebook or on a separate sheet of paper, and then like have them, turn that in, or have them write 3 mistakes and 3 corrections, something like that. Or maybe have like a reflection question that you can ask them after a certain, and these, reflection questions can be pretty generic, but something kind of in written form, like engage them to also write in addition to completing the Duolingo assignment. So I think the best ones though would be something easy as just write these new words down, keep a little log, a little dictionary of these new words or phrases, and then write your mistakes down so that they're also actively, engaging with what they got wrong and why.
Those are all amazing ideas. Thank you so much, Katharine.
Thank
So
you.
if there aren't any questions from the audience, I could actually pose our last plushie question. So if you want to win a plushie, again, you have time, take your time to respond to this question, really think about it. And we're going to be going back afterwards to the comments and choosing someone. So the question is, what is your main takeaway from Katharine's presentation today? How, what are you going to take from what you learned today and perhaps implement or change it in your classroom? So we're really curious. And feel free to send any comments or questions that you have as well. And even if we don't get to it, we could always come back and comment later. But thank you so much, Katharine.
You got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. So as I said, take your time answering that question. I'm going to write it in the chat as well. So let us know, what is your main takeaway? What are you going to do to switch up maybe your curriculum a little bit? So thanks again, Katharine. And if there aren't any questions, we'll see you in the Facebook Educators Network. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, Katharine. Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you.